Ugh, homework again? This was the most popular thing I heard in my Algebra 1 classroom day after day. My name's Alex Jankowski, and I'm here from the University of Missouri St. Louis to talk to you about my action research project. You probably guessed it, yes, it was about homework. I was really concerned about homework, and the more formal title for my presentation is Homework Engagement Strategies Added into Class Time for High School Math Student Schedule. I had a big problem. My Algebra 1 students were not turning in homework assignments, and I was curious to see if this is why the test scores were low, or could this have something to do with test scores being lower than normal and their overall grades being lower than normal. So I decided to take action and develop the research question, can integrating homework into classroom time create positive student engagement on their homework and further success in content understanding? So I wanted to know if working on homework in class would make the students a little more happy and if that would actually help their learning. My setting was in a suburban St. Louis high school. It was my classroom. It's a general education classroom. We teach Algebra 1 during this hour. I see them every day, Monday through Friday, from 11:04 to 11:32, and 12 o'clock to 12:25. It's two different times because we have a split lunch. So we do the first half, they go to lunch, and then we come to the second half. The participants were 22 Algebra 1 students, 20 freshmen, 1 sophomore, 1 senior. I had an evenly split male-female classroom, and I also had 1 instructional aide. Her job is just to kind of give me helping hands throughout this hour because of the large amount of students that have IEPs. To be specific, 10 out of the 22 students have an IEP plan, or a 504. Two quotes that really stood out to me during my literature review. The first one was, when homework tasks are consistent with the teacher's intended purposes, students are more prone to understand homework goals and are likely to engage more deeply in the tasks. I felt like a lot of my students just thought I was giving them homework to do busy work, so if I changed the method to do homework in class, they could really understand my purpose a little bit more, that it was not to just give them work to do, but to further their understanding. And the second quote was, any time spent on homework may have negative effects as it can reinforce incorrect understandings. So the way that I took this was, if a student goes home and they do the problems incorrectly, that can continue to interrupt the student learning the process correctly. So if they do the homework but they do it incorrectly, it's not effective at all. Interventions that I decided to incorporate in this project was chunking lessons. So we would do 2 or 3 practice problems from the lesson together, and then I would give them 7 to 10 minutes to work on the assignment. During that time, I'd walk around, answer questions, kind of peeking on the kiddos that I am concerned about to make sure that they are doing it correctly and not doing any misconceptions. Then we would pull it together and do 1 or 2 problems from that assignment. So if there's a problem that they were struggling on as a whole class, we would dive into those 2 problems and then go back to 10 to 15 minutes to work on the assignment. All of the homework was done in class. The entire assignment, I let students kind of guide the pacing. If students did not finish on the day of the lesson, I very often let 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning of the next day be dedicated to finishing the homework from the day before. Students led the pacing, so we worked at a pace that was good for the students. If they needed extra time on one lesson, then we took it, because it wasn't the same for each lesson. Some needed a little bit more depth and some didn't. So we could move fast through the ones that didn't need the extra time and spend extra time working on the more difficult subjects for that particular class and those particular students. Before the interventions, I gave them a survey, and then after the interventions, I gave them the same exact survey, same questions. One question that really stood out to me on the survey for the results, how often do you complete your homework? This was the results for the pre-intervention. Only 10 kiddos said always, 11 said sometimes, and 1 said never. After the interventions, that changed. 14 kiddos said always. Sometimes dropped a little bit, but that never disappeared. So that was pretty cool to see. The other question that really stood out to me from that survey was, how often do you feel as if homework helps you to practice the concept? So pre-intervention, the responses looked like this. Sometimes was the highest, and then always only 5 kids said that it always helps them. But post-intervention, that number jumped up also. Here's a table to kind of represent my baseline data. The pink talks about homework assignments that were turned in on time. Green is homework assignments that were turned in late, and yellow was zeros. I don't take off any points for homework being turned in late, so that's why some of the greens are 10. 2 numbers that I really cared about was this one. 49 out of 154 homeworks were zeros. To me, that was unacceptable. That's about 1/3 of the entire class assignments for all the students. And the class average for their test, which was out of 35 points. So 24 out of 35 was the class average. Then after the interventions, you can kind of see how the yellow went down. Only 37 out of 154 assignments were not turned in and were scored as a 0, but the class average dropped a little bit to 22.4. Again, yellows kind of dropped out a little bit, which was awesome. This time 30 out of 154, so that's a little less than 20% now. That's like a 13% swing, but the class average went down to a 20.3. So to sum up all of that kind of together, homeworks not turned in went from 49 to 37 to 30, and that all went down. And then the average test scores went down also. So that was a negative effect that I saw. Positive outcomes that I saw throughout this entire project. More assignments were turned in on time. Like I talked about on the last page, that was something that I really was looking for to see if that could be a cause of why some grades were really low. Students were a lot more positive. Each day they knew that it was time to work when it was time to get to class, and they left happier knowing that they didn't need to do it on their own when they got home. And it kind of gave them student empowerment. They got to lead the lessons and, hear their voice heard. Like, oh, you know what? We really feel like we need more time, rather than me being like, well, you should have asked me yesterday. We really got to listen to what the students needed, and I think that helped them a lot. Some not so positive outcomes. Lower test scores. The averages kept dropping, but I'm not sure if this was because of lack of students doing the homework assignments just on their own, or if it was the difficulty of the units as they went on. They were also reliant on peers and teachers, so when they're in the classroom and doing all that work, they're not necessarily relying on their notes and their own knowledge. They could ask a buddy or ask me or my instructional aide. And there were less review days. Because we took longer on some lessons, it cut out a bunch of the review days where we could put all the information together. So those were some positive outcomes and some not so positive outcomes. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my presentation. Sorry I talked a little bit fast. I wanted to make sure I got all of my information across. If you have any more questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at amjc7c@mail.missouri.edu. Here are some references, and thank you very much.